Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay. We have Yaakov Yellen here on here. Let me show everybody who's here. So we're starting to get the crowd back.
Okay.
Chaim, you should come also again. We'd like to see everybody in person. Okay, Harold, good. By the way, people should look. Everyone's here, so people can. We have good refreshments. We have good Krispy Kreme donuts. Oh, Jerry has a big smile on his face.
He doesn't eat that stuff.
Yeah, he does tonight. Okay.
Wonderful. There we go.
So we left off on the chute, the number of strings. And I think we left off on page 166.
Yeah.
In the previous section, we discussed, you have a sefer, yeah. The maximum length of the tzitzis strings, lechatchila, the minimum, right. And we have it, the shita was 8 centimeters, right? According to Rav Chaim Naya, which means that the tied section must measure at least 8 centimeters, and the rest of the string would be 16 centimeters, for a total of 24 centimeters from the first tie to the end, which, oh my gosh. 1 second. Sue, where's my talesim? I had to. Oh, they removed. Okay.
These are killers.
I'm so glad I'm such
These are killers.
So this is the tied portion. Of course, this is the string portion. Okay? So, and remember, we're going to learn tonight that we take 4 strings, and the 4 strings are put through the loop. You have 4 on this side and 4 on this side. So you're going to have 8. And then you take the one long string and you wind it. First, you make a double knot, and then we're going to have winding. So this talus is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 knots. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 windings. We're going to see how many windings per winding. That we're going to have a machlokas tonight. But anyways, this has to be at least 8 centimeters, and this has to be 16 centimeters. And the windings are making, you take one long string and you wind, then you make a knot, and you wind, and you make a knot, and wind, and then we'll talk about it a little later on. Okay. So the Gemara earlier in Menachos writes that if the tzitzis were severed, they were initially the proper length, but then they were cut. We all, especially when we were kids, we'd come back from a game, whatever, and the tzitzis were torn. They're still kosher if at least the amount of kedei aniva means the amount of string you need to make a bow tie, remains from the section of the string that is not wound and tied, right? This is the string that's not wound and tied, right? So if there's enough string left to make a kedei aniva. Now, which is the length needed to tie a slip knot with it, 5 centimeters according to Chazon Ish, and 4 centimeters according to Rav Chaim Noah. So, not very, so if the string got clipped or something, as long as there's 5 or 4 centimeters length, it still would be kosher. Right? In Masechta Menachos Lamed Ches Amud Beis, Amr b'nei Rab Chia, Gardume Tchelis Ksherin. Gardume refers to the tzitzis that were cut. Gardume Azov is the hyssop branch, right? Which they used to dip the paraduma water. And then they would dip it in the water and then sprinkle it. And l'chora, they're both similar, right? So because there's got to be a shear of the hyssop. And if it's cut or trimmed, it wouldn't be kosher. Kama shear gardumim. What is the shear for tzitzis? Omer bar Hamduri, Amar Shmuel, kedei la'anvan. You need enough of a string to make a tie, to make a slip knot. Im nifsak achut mi'ikor psula. But if it's severed here from the connection to the garment, then of course it's not kosher. In light of this, the Mishnah Berurah writes that one should inspect the location where the tzitzis is attached to the garment to ensure that it's not torn at all. That means every day when you look at your tzitzis, you got to make sure that it's not torn. Right? Kula ameim nifsak chud echad meikaro. Meikaro needs the base. The place that it's tied to the garment. Puzzle. The Kosav Aturei Zav, the Taz, right? One of the major commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, Shacham Taz. Al kein roy l'chol yirei shamayim sheyayin b'shas bedika gam betchilas mitzom shalat tzitzis. Yirei shamayim, before he puts on his tzitzis, should check that place. If there's a tie. So what is the halacha if the most of the strings are detached, such that only a kedei aniva, the amount with which one makes a bow, remains? Are the tzitzis still kosher if most or all of the strings are detached? Or most a certain number of them remain in their full length? That means if all of these are cut, or do you need a certain shear that some of them have to be the 16 centimeter, whatever we said? Yeah, I think we said 16 centimeter length remain. How many of those strings have to be there? That question is a subject to machlokas among the Rishonim. Rabbeinu Tam, right, the grandson of Rashi, holds that the tzitzis are kosher only if 2 strings remain whole, in addition to the rest of them having at least of a kedei aniva. Let's see Rabbeinu Tam in Toisus Menachos Lamed Ches, the same blot we just learned on the Gardume. Omer Rabbeinu Tam, the Achshav Shnoisni Dalet Chutin Beis Mishum Lovin Beis Mishum Tcheles. So in Rabbeinu Tam's, we're going to see, we started with 4 strings. He recommended 2 of Tcheles and 2 of Lovon, and then you threaded the 4 into the hole, and now you have 8, right? The Koiflin L'Shmoina Tzarch Lizar. The Nifsaku Shloisha Min HaChutim. Shema He Mishlosha Chutim. V'nimsa Shalon Yishar Beis Chutin Shlemin. So if 3 of the 8 doubled strings were detached, perhaps they are from 3 of the 4 different strings, and then 2 complete threads would not remain. So from this language of Rabbeinu Tam, it sounds like we need at least two remaining. To understand the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, we should mention again that the tzitzis consists of 4 long single strings that are doubled over. The 4 strings then become 8 with 4 on each side. Therefore, if even one string on one side is completely ripped, the other side of that string is still like Kedei Aniv. What he's talking about is after you make this knot, you have 4 here and 4 here. So you're never really sure. You can't trace that this one is this one, but if you have at least 1 on either side, you're going to be okay. According to Rabbeinu Tam, at least 2 of the single strings, which is 4 doubled strings, must be complete. Therefore, if 3 out of the 8 doubled strings are ripped, then the tzitzis are puzzle, because they may be from 3 of the 4 single strings. Now, in contrast to Rabbeinu Tam, the Rosh holds that even if all 4 single strings were ripped, the tzitzis are still kosher if the Avni remains on all of them. So Machlokes Rabbeinu Tam and the Rosh, very clear. Rabbeinu Tam says you need at least 2 long strings. According to Rosh, you don't need, even if you had all of them, the 5 centimeters, it would still be kosher. Says the Rosh in Halachos Ketanis, Afilu igardim kol ches chutin v'ishtar ben kedei aniva, kosher. According to the Rosh, the tzitzis only become puzzle if the 2 sides of the string become puzzle, such as less than kedei aniva remains past the tide on both sides. Now, if you cannot ascertain which strings on one side match with the strings on the other side, that means you're not sure, right? You look at this string, you don't know, is this string matched with this one, right? Then if any 2 of the strings are completely ripped, the tzitzis would be puzzle even according to Rosh. This is because in that case, the 2 ripped strings may be part of the same long string, in which case that one would contain less than Kedei Aniva. Now, if one is capable of ensuring that the knots were tied consistently with the same 4 strings on each side throughout the knotting, and the strings on each side were not mixed, the footnote says this can be accomplished by tying 4 of the strings together during the course of forming the wrappings. Okay. Then according to Rabbeinu Tam, even if 2 strings were entirely cut on the same side, such that neither contains a Kedei Aniva, the tzitzis are still kosher. According to the Rosh, in such a case, even if all 4 strings on one side are cut, the tzitzis would still be kosher, since each of the 4 long strings still has the Kedei Aniva remaining on the other side. So the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam, of course, were earlier Rishonim that the Shulchan Aruch relied on to paskin. So the Shulchan Aruch writes that the halacha in principle follows the Rosh on this issue. But the Ramah adds that in practice, the custom is in accordance with the stricter opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. So again, Ashkenazim usually follow Balei Tosfos, right? Rabbeinu Tam is one of the Balei Tosfos. Ramah, who live in Krakow, who's paskins for the Ashkenazim, it's not surprising that he follows Rabbeinu Tam. Now, the Rosh was a Talmid of Rav Meir Rottenberg in Worms. He eventually fled and ended up in Toledo in Spain. Remember, Rav Yaakov Yellen and I, who's here tonight, had the schus of being in Toledo, where the Rosh served as the Rosh of the Kehillah. So even though his roots were Ashkenazi, but the Shulchan Aruch always follows the Rosh, right? The Rosh, the Rif, and the Rambam is one of the trifecta that he relies on in paskening. So the Shulchan Aruch says in Orach Chaim Yud Beis, im nifsaku chutei aknaf, the nishtar behem kedei anivas kol achutim hapsukim biyachad kosher. He says even if all the strings have been cut, but there's a kedei aniva for all of them, it's kosher. So we know that's the sheet of the Rosh. Now we wouldn't know that just reading the Shulchan Aruch. We would have to learn the Tur, which remember preceded the Shulchan Aruch, right? The Tur was Rav Yaakov Baal HaTurim, the son of the Rosh. Now, the major commentary on the tour was the Beis Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo, who I believe the Beis Yosef was sort of a preliminary primer for him before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. In the Beis Yosef, he goes into depth and will tell us who the Rishonim are, and he'll go through all the various shitot. Because otherwise, he doesn't quote the Rosh here, but it's usually, we would find out in the Beis Yosef that it's the Rosh. So he says, it's got to have a Kedei Aniva, that even if one of the strings doesn't have that length, the 4 centimeter or the 5 centimeter length, it's possible. Right? Each string is doubled. Right? If two of those strings, because then you have one whole string that's not good. When they made the windings, they would make a siman so you would know which string is which. They were always able to identify, right, which one of these 4 strings belongs to this one of these 4 strings. It's 2 different strings. You have the proper length.
They don't make scissors here, do they in LA? They make them, or do they get them from China or what?
No, so for example, Chaim Eisenberg and we wound our own tzitzis. I went to his house. No, you go to Steve Kraft, he will sell you these tzitzis. It comes in a package.
Asking where they're made, where the tzitzis are made before you put them on.
Why probably in Israel, maybe in Borough Park. I mean, it's the tzitzis are made. I mean, you're saying they come from China? Why? No, tzitzis have to be made l'shem tzitzis. We're gonna learn that.
We're only talking about the string. The other stuff is.
Can you put dye in the strings to from one side to the other? Can you put it? I mean, we put blue in it, but can you put other color to identify which side is which, if which string is on one
There's
side?
a siman. There's a way to do a siman. You could put maybe a marker at the tip of it.
Yeah, you could put it. Yeah.
They made a siman.
So you could put
They made a marker. Maybe you could take some
dye.
coloring. Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't possible it doesn't possible the string itself.
Now let's go to Rabbeinu Tam. Lo machshir melech b'nishtar beis chutin shleim. So the Shulchan Aruch actually says bepeh mole that Rabbeinu Tam would aser unless there's 2 long strings. Nainu arba roshim shekol echad maroshim orach yud beis goydlim, that they have to be the right size, which we said was 16. 12 thumbs, which we said is 16 centimeters. Az machshim k'sheniskor shnei chutim acherim nishtar b'em k'dei aniva. That means even if some of the remaining strings are shortened, but they're at least 5 centimeters, it's be okay. So you don't have a 2 left. Therefore, if you're not sure which one of these 4 connects to the other 4, maybe it's all the same. Says the Ramah, the Kosher dig unique karma dalad roshim shebetzadechad. And he made a siman, so he knows which one is which. But nifsiku gimel roshim betzadechad the pasul. As vare nifsiku gimel chotim v'im nifsiku bebeit tzadi nami pasul shem gimel chutimim. Clearly the shita of Rabbeinu Tam. Says the Shulchan Aruch again, avalim lo nechtechu al shnei roshim. If only 2 of the strings were cut, machshir b'chdei aniva. V'alochik is for Rishona. He says the halacha is like the initial svar of the Rosh. Miyuhecha the efsher tov lachosh l'svar Rabbeinu Tam. Shulchan Aruch says you should be concerned about the sheet of Rabbeinu Tam, and says the Ramah the noagim Rabbeinu Tam. So very clear machlokas between the Ashkenazim and the Sfardim. The case of ripped tzitzis arises quite commonly, but as is evident from the sources we have been seen so far, it's complex, contains many details. We will suffice here with a brief summary of some of the key practical halachos from the Pischei Tshuvos. He says, Nikra chut echad mashmona chutim la'achar gmar kliyas atzitzis b'knaf kedin v'alacha. It means you put the 8 tzitzis on the corner appropriately, and then one of the strings tore. Afilu nechtach ada kesher, v'lo nishar mimenu klum. That means the string tore all the way to the knot here. Hatzitzis ksherim l'chol hadeus. So far, one string that's cut all the way to the knot, so you only have 7 hanging, is okay. Nikru shnei chutim mitoch shmonas hachutim, v'lo nishar b'hem kedei aniva. So let's say 2 are gone, 2 or they're dangling and they're less than 4 centimeters, right? So you have 6 good ones, and then 2 of these are bad. Azim dikdek b'shas pliyas hatzitzis. If he was careful when he did the tzitzis, sheyu tamid oisam arba roshim b'tzad echad, v'arba roshim b'tzad hasheni, that he separated these 2 and these 4, right? These 4 and these 4. Vashnim shenikru emitzad echad, and the 2 that tore are from one side. Hatzitzis kshera, because you have going to have 3 intact ones. V'im lo dikdek b'kach, but if he's not careful to know that all 4 of these are separate from these 4, and they're the same 4 that are on this side and the 4 on this side. Or shenikra mikol tzad chut echad, or there's a string that's been torn on either side completely down to the knot. So then that's not good. Hatzitzis psula. Elam ken yishar be'echad mishnei chutim shenifsuku kedei aniva. Like we said, it's only kosher if one string on one side has been completely removed. Otherwise, the other one needs to have kedei aniva, right? So we have 6 plus a small one, and you can have 1 absent one. That's the minimum. That's the minimum you can have for kosher tzitzis if it's torn. Then the Pischei Tshuva goes on to say, Nikru shloisha chutin mitoch shmona chutim. 3 are torn out of the 8. Afilu nishar bishloshtam kedei aniva. So let's say these 3 have been torn, right? You have 4 good ones, 1 good one on this side, and these 3 are kedei aniva. So that's already we come into the la rosh hatzitzis ksheira Rabbeinu Tam psula. Remember, Rabbeinu Tam said you could only have up to 2 torn. Once you have 3 torn, it's not good. The rosh allowed more. So that's already told in the machlokes with Rabbeinu Tam and the rosh. Like, remember the Shulchan Aruch said, at the end of his statement, he said, we should always worry about Rabbeinu Tam sheet, even though he didn't. He said, Nachon, the Svara is like the first one. But Habal Nefesh should be Machmir, is basically what he means. But you don't have to immediately take off the tzitzis. Obviously, they were worried that maybe there was wool and linen on it, then you take it off if it's shotness. You're allowed to wear tzitzis that are shotness if the tzitzis are kosher. Then he says, Nikru shloisha arba chutim mitoch hashmona v'lo nishar b'hem kedei aniva. If 3 were torn, there's not kedei aniva. Then, of course, even the rosh is not going to allow that. Unless, im dikdik b'shas asiyas hatzitzis sheyutamid oisam arba roshim mitzad echad v'arba roshim mitzad hasheni, hatzitzis ksher la rosh. Rabbeinu Tam psula. V'dina kanal ois gimel v'im dikdik b'kach hatzitzis psula chol hadeus. Right? If you're not sure that these 4 are the same 4 that were the 4 on this side and the 4 on this side, then it's going to be possible according to everybody. Nikra chamisha chutim. It means all 4 on one side were torn, and you have 1 on the other side that was torn. Va'afim nifsaku kol hashmona, even if all 8 were torn, if nishar b'hem kedei aniva, dinam kanal ois gimel. It's like ois gimel, which we said was kosher, huh? So we said that's the machlokes Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam. Lo nishnar b'shtayim em kedei aniva dinam kanal ois beis, which depended on whether or not you were medagdek that it was the same string. Lo nishar ba'arba mem kedei aniva, if 4 of them don't have kedei aniva, dinam ka ois dalid, which we said if you're medagdek, then according to Rosh it would be okay. And then lo nishar b'chamisha mem kedei aniva tzitzis psula according to everybody. It means if 5 of them don't have the shear of making the 4 centimeters, it's possible. Vida'od, ki chutz nispark v'nisbatel sheziraso. That means if it's unwound, right? It's unraveled. Dino kenifsak, v'nitikla, it's as if it's been torn completely. V'im nisparka sheziro nikul gamri, chelik b'shmonas achutim hadakikim. If the threads that compose each string are ripped or unraveled, so as long as two, if you can see it's 2-ply, then it's considered a kosher chut. Now, we talked tonight about tying these knots and winding it. So when tying this, we're on page 172. When tying the strings onto the tzitzit garment, one of the strings, so for example, in my tzitzit, we use the tcheles string, which you can also buy. That's a little bit more expensive, but so he sells you 3 regular ones, and then you buy 1 long one. So you add
It's not looped through, is it?
Chaim.
Yeah,
Why isn't my tcheles string looped through the garment?
what?
How does that make any sense?
Oh, it's possible.
Not loop through the garment. How's that possible?
Yeah, he's looking at it.
Of course it is.
Does it fade?
You should have 4 strings there.
This one coming through, maybe.
No, I'm saying, but why don't we should see it here?
That's right.
Unless does yours fade, Chaim?
No, blue tcheles has a property that is not fade. It's everlast. That's one of the qualities of the tcheles. If it faded, it would not be real tcheles.
But there's no blue on any of the strands that are looped through the hole.
Let me see your talus. Is this the one you had? Is this the one that you did with? You may have Rambam tzitzis where it's only half. One of the strings is half blue.
That's it. Okay. Right, because the part that comes through the garment, the part that comes through the hole is not blue. It only becomes blue like a part way down, and then we wrap it, right, because the tcheles string is blue pretty much everywhere else. And then you took one, then you wind the blue, but this part, I guess, part of it is not blue.
Can I ask you a question? What happens if you're in a place where you can't replace it? Can you take it apart and redo it again to make it a good thing? Can you, if it's possible, and you take the whole thing apart and redo it with the same string you?
Yeah, but if it tore, Alan, you're not going to have the right lengths.
Yeah,
So
but
whether you take it apart, if it tore, let's say you see it, and the string is now Kedei Aniva, or it's less than Kedei Aniva, you're not going to be able to restore it so that it's going to be more Kedei Aniva if you took it apart and restrung it.
Well, that's according
Let's
to
get a new
my
string. Yeah, you could take it apart, add a new string to it, and then you could redo it.
Then it's like that, or else if you could take it apart and let's say pull the string from the other side, make it even on the other side.
Think about it. If it's short now, how are you ever going to have enough length? It's not. You can't restore it. You'd have to replace the string.
You could do it, taking it apart and restring it again.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. When tying the strings onto the tzitzis garment, one of the strings is wound around the others multiple times and secured with a double knot. You guys see that? It means one of them is wound, and then first of all, the moment you bring the strings out, you make a double knot. Knot. Then you take that extra long and then you wind 7 times, let's say. Then you make a knot, double knot, and then you wind again. You see, that's why you hear winding. Each winding is divided by a double knot. The process is repeated a number of times, and customs differ as to the exact number and method of windings and knots. The Gemara Menachos outlines the basic halacha parameters for the tying process. Tana, hapoiches lo yifchos misheva. You can't have less than 7. We don't know what he's talking about yet. Va'moisif lo yosif al shlosh esrei. You shouldn't have more than 13. Hapoiches lo yifchos misheva keneged shiva rikiim. The 7 is because there's 7 heavens. Va'moisif lo yosif al shlosh esrei keneged shiva rikiim. The 7 heavens. V'shiva avir shebeneim. And between each rakia is like a space. So that's 13. So what's the pshat? What do we mean 13 and what do we mean 7? The Rishonim dispute the interpretation. According to the Rambam, it refers to the number of chuliot, sets. It means that one may make between 7 and 13 sets of windings each. Okay? So like, for example, my tzitzis has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 windings.
That's the first one.
Not winding. So you have
But not each
1,
is
2,
winding.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are windings where you see
Yeah.
you see those are the windings. And of course, there's a knot in between. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 knots, right? So, but they're
Right.
talking about, but the way the Rambam
next
is
one is
learning,
11.
when the Gemara 7, and 13, it referred to these, how many windings can you have? Now, according to the Rambam, you can have anywhere between 7 and 13. You don't have to have 7. You can have 10. You can have 11. Now, based on the statement of the Gemara earlier on the same daf, the Rambam understands that each set consists of 3 windings, which totals between 21 and 39 windings. So it's not so pashut that the 7 and 13 was just 7 and 13. It was really the 7 is really 21 because it's 3. But according to one interpretation mentioned in Tosfos, the Menachos 39a, this passage in the Gemara refers to the number of krichos windings in each set, rather than the number of sets. Thus, each set may number between 7 and 13 krichos. But the Gemara does not address how many sets to make. The Beis Yosef mentions a practice to tie 4 chulios, or sets, numbering 7, not Susie, could I beg you to bring me my tzitzis? It's on my, on my bed. You know when I changed? Most of the regular like laptzedekels, the talis cotton, follows this approach. That means for my talis gadol, I was machmir, but the regular tzitzis, I want to show that. This Beis Yosef practice to tie 4 numbering, so they have 4 windings, 7, 9, 11, and 13, which he suggests is based upon interpretation mentioned by Tosfos. So the Beis Yosef, again, this is the commentary on the tour, right? The son of the road. Ani ra'iti shenoagim likroch ba'avir rishon sheva krichos. So after the first knot, the first winding is 7. Uvesheni teisha, v'shlish echadesrei, revi shloshesrei. She'olim kol hakrichos arboim. Right, thank you, honey. So this is a regular tzitzis, right? And you have, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly like the Beis Yosef. And the Beis Yosef, these windings, if you take a look at it, is 7, 9, 11, and 13. If you look at your tzitzis, that's exactly what it is. 7. So again, the tzitzis are made the same way, except there's no tchelis. You take one of the long strings, after you make this knot, you wind it 7 times, and then you make a knot. Wind it, what did you say? 7
9.
is 7, 9, and it's so
11 and 13.
so the first winding is 7,
They'll have
the
4.
next one is 9, you can count it, you'll see, and then it's 11, then it's 13, and it adds up to 40. Kimin, hey echad sha'oin lamites v'mashem ola arboim. The word Hashem echad, the gematria is 39, and then with Hashem, it's 40. That's what it's the Beis Yosef. Venira, this is not a Chassidish Rav. Venira li, shetamam lefi shem sovrim dahad tanya lo yichos misheva lo yitzv al shloshesrei akrichos shebein kesher lekesher koi. So it's not like the Rambam that when the Gemara said 7 and 13, it referred to how many windings to have, but rather it refers to the number of windings per krichos, that it was a given that there are 4 krichos with the windings 7, 9, 11, and 13. That's how the Beis Yosef is doing. Which is like, lo yivchos mishav lo yosef al shloshes krichos shebein kesher lekesher koi, kepesh achron shekos v'atoises. Mishum hachi matchilen b'sheva, da poiches lo yivchos misheva. We don't go less than 7. You know, there's a principle, Mylin B'Kodesh V'Loi Moirin. We always go up rather than down. We finish b'shlosh. And the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with this custom cited by the Beis Yosef. Well, of course, he is one and the same. The Magen Avraham and Mishnah Berurah comment that according to the Arizal and the Shloah Kodesh, it is more appropriate to do 8 windings in the second set rather than 9, right? So that means 7, 9, you'd rather do 8. Let me just see what is this? This yields a total of 39, which is the numer v'alkol of Hashem echad without the extra 1 of Hashem. So, okay. This is a whole different sheet. Mishnah Berurah says, "Kavonos kosu b'sheni chet." In the second windings, it should be 8, not 9. The Keni Schema Achronim, the Zayin v'chet hu shem shel ka. Right? Okay. Other customs concerning the number of windings in each of the 4 sets exist as well. For example, the Mishnah Berurah, in the same source, also mentioned an additional custom to wind 26 windings, 6, 5, 5, and 10, which is equivalent to the numerical value of the name of Hashem, 26. The Yalkut Yosef rules, in accordance with the putting the Shulchan Aruch, that one should tie 40 windings, and the Chidah holds that one wraps its tzitzis with only 26 windings, 10, 5, 6, 6. Wow. Did you realize it was such a major machlokas between the kind of windings we have? And that's why, if you notice, the regular tzitzis is like this, and my talis has a different sheet. Okay. Well, should the tzitzis be tucked in,
Ernie,
or should we wear them hanging out? Yes, Chaim.
So I don't know if there's anything, I've seen anything here regarding tcheles, because the tying of tcheles is completely different than tying tzitzis without tcheles. And it's a brand new thing. And I don't think they're even giving it in. If you go on the Totchela website, you will see like a dozen different ways to tie tzitzis with tcheles. There's nothing in here about that, really.
Hang on.
A
Page
couple of sheets.
235. We're going to have section 7 is all the laws of tcheles.
Yeah, but I don't know if I briefed it. I didn't see anything there about
How to wind it.
how to wind it.
Correct. We'll see. I don't see it either, but there will be some discussion. What Chaim is mentioning is that when you have tcheles, there's a special way of how to wind it with the tcheles. Okay. Another interesting and practical halachic question related to the chutim of the tzitzis is whether it is preferable that they be visible or that they're tucked into our garment. Part of the purpose of the mitzvah is seeing them, right? So, as stated clearly by the Torah, the purpose of wearing tzitzis is to remember all the mitzvahs. This takes place by seeing the tzitzis strings on a constant basis, says the Torah. Iker mitzvah al schirsa mitzvahs. The foundation of the mitzvah is that it should always remind you of the mitzvahs. You have to remember the mitzvahs every minute. Sometimes a person will put a little bow on his finger, right, to remember, I have a meeting with such and such person. So it reminds you when you look at it. So it's the same thing. There's a very nice biography of the Tur. We've been talking about the Tur a number of times, who was the son of the Rosh. How do we ensure that tzitzis serves as a constant reminder practically? It seems through the Shulchan Aruch that one should wear the talis cotton on top of one's other clothing, as some Hasidim do nowadays. Iker mitzvahs talis cotton, l'loiv show al begadav, k'dei shetamid yirei v'yizkar mitzvahs. The Mishnah Berurah adds that even if one does not wear his tzitzis in this fashion, which is the common practice nowadays in most circles, one should at least allow the strings to hang down outside of one's clothing and not keep them tucked in. He goes on to strongly castigate those who tuck them in as degrading the mitzvah and ignoring the reason behind it. It says, Al begodov, v'ksavim isa detas kotten tachas begodov. He says, in the Kabbalah, it says that your talis should be under your garments. Because of Magen Avram, the strings, though, should be outside. Not those who sort of tuck them in. He says people who wear their tzitzis tucked in because they're walking along among non-Jews are still fulfilling the mitzvah. So he says, "Mikol mokom b'shas habracha you megulin daled amos." When you recite the bracha of tzitzis, the tzitzis strings should be shown. And then he says, "Yireyu kamad chsiv v'risem oso v'osam anoshim hamesimim atzitzis b'michtasayim shlam." Those people who put their tzitzis in their pants, lo daishem alimim einayim, they are hiding their eyes. Mimad chsiv v'risem oso zuchartem. They're hiding their eyes from what it says in the pasuk. Od mevazin is mitzvahs Hashem yisbarach, and they're degrading the mitzvah of Hashem. Va'atidin ein litanas adin al zeh. They're going to have to give din v'cheshbon on this. U'ma sha'omim sheholchim ben anochrim. People say, well, they walk around among Gentiles. L'zeh hayadai sheyasimu atzitzis b'toch haknaf. That's a good reason why you would wear it. If they had some Nobel Prize that a king had given them, wouldn't they wear it proudly? They would wear it in front of non-Jews as well. How much more so regarding tzitzis, that is, it shows that it's like the badge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Mishnah Berurah. However, the Yalkut Yosef writes that according to Sephardic and Kabbalistic customs, one should conceal the tzitzis string inside one's clothing. Minagenu shegam atzitzios, even the strings, mechusos tachas abgadim, says the Rav Avadia. That they don't walk around with their tzitzis out. V'chei noagu gdoilei ador Sephardim. He says the great Chachamim, they didn't wear their tzitzis out. V'chei roi lios al pi Kabbalah. Uminag Ashkenazim lahotzi atzitzios l'chutz. He says the Ashkenazim do wear their tzitzis out. On the other hand, Rav Yaakov Hillel writes in his Truvas Vayoshev Hayam that the writings of none other than the Arizal indicate that one should wear the tzitzis strings outside, similar to the approach of the Mishnah Berurah. And he thinks the Sephardim should also wear their tzitzis out. Wearing the when they talked about wearing the tzitzis inside, they meant the garment. It means you don't have to wear the tzitzis outside, only the strings. It shouldn't be dug into your pants. You got to be able to see them all the time. The Ari says you have to look at the tzitzis all the time. Some Ashkenazi poskim also sanction this practice of wearing the tzitzis strings in. So who are the Ashkenazim? He says the Or Yitzchak, the Mishnah Halachos, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Some Rishonim write that one need not wear the tzitzis strings out. That's the Sefer Itur. And the Vilna Gaon may have also worn his tzitzis in. They bring from the Meiser Rab. Look at this. For further sources and discussion, see Rav Jason Weiner.
I've actually read that article.
Right? Jason Weiner is our chaplain at Cedar Sinai. Tzitzis in or out, Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society, spring 2005.
He's still a student.
Huh?
He was still a student when he left.
Yeah, he used to come to my daf yomi. He's Sidney Teichman's son-in-law, Jason. Okay.
There's a couple of other articles also on the website.
Oh, he's got very interesting stuff on medical halacha. And of course, he invites Rav Asher Weiss periodically. Rav Asher Weiss has spoken a number of times at Cedars under his auspices. So he's close to him.
Can you say one of the things that you wear the garment out inside is because to keep it clean? If you're outside and you do the work, whatever kind of work you every place you go, the garment gets dirty very often, just like your shirt. When you don't change your armor canvas every day, you do it, you wash it sometimes.
But it seems even from a mystical point of view, the Zohar says you got to keep him inside. Now, some argue that what they mean by keeping it inside means just the beged, but the tziot should be outside. So it seems it's not just a practical thing like you want to say, Elazar, not to get dirty, but it seems that there's some mystical approach. I must tell you a story that when I was at one of my hospitals, of course, we change in the locker room. So I'll tell you two stories about that. So when I was a resident at UCLA, there was a neurosurgeon, Eino Yehudi, not a Jewish person. And when he saw my tzitzis, he said to me, "We have one of your kind at our country club." Which was the Los Angeles Country Club. When on Wilshire Boulevard, when you drive there, it's a restricted country club. And he said, "We have one of your kind." One of my David Packard of Hewlett Packard. Apparently, I did not know that he was Jewish. He claimed that David Packard is one of your kind, and he's in our country club. Then, when I joined Downey, one of our hospitals, so there was a general surgeon there who was the chief of surgery, and we thought he was really a very tough guy. We had a nickname for him. I won't even tell you what the nickname was. We gave him a nickname almost like of a Nazi, because that's the way he walked around. There were a number of ex-SS doctors. There was a guy, I'm trying to remember his name. I won't say his name, but we ended up having to take care of him at the end of his life. He needed urology care. We were his doctor, and his wife, I think, was even a Jewish woman. But it was known that he had worked in Germany or something like that. But this other guy who we thought, so one day he sees me in the locker room and he sees my tzitzis. He started singing chazanas to me. It turns out his father was a chazan, and he knew all sorts of chazan. He sang tal with me. So again, just the tzitzis, is like your badge, is like your passport. Okay. Page one.
I want a story about a guy went before a judge and he pleaded because he was religious. The judge wanted to know
where's your tzitzis?
Where's your tzitzis? He let him go. I don't know if he had. He had to prove that he was how religious he was.
Okay. So treating tzitzis with proper respect. What should one do with tzitzis strings that become pasul or can no longer be used? How should they be disposed of? I think somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago about shemus. So the Gemara Megillah distinguishes between how to dispose of two categories of mitzvah item, tashmishe mitzvah and tashmishe kedusha. Tashmishe mitzvah refers to things that are used as part of mitzvahs, and then there's something called tashmishe kedusha, things that are used for something that is kadosh. Let's see. Ton Rabanan, tashmishe mitzvah nizrak, and you can throw it away. For example, a lulav is, I think, another example of a tashmishe mitzvah. Tashmishe kedusha nignozim, but something that is used for kedusha have to be buried. Eluain tashmishe mitzvah. Sukkah, right? Lulav, shofar, tzitzis. Those things can be thrown away. According to the Gemara, tzitzis are classified as tashmishe mitzvah since they do not contain Hashem's name in them. Like Yaakov said, therefore may be thrown out when they are no longer usable. This is the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch as well. However, the Ramah cites an opinion that even tashmishe mitzvah objects, such as tzitzis, may not be disposed of in an unclean location. Some people are careful to even perform geniza, burying them in the ground. It means they put them in a shemus box where the shemus goes. Says Shulchan Aruch, chutei tzitzis shenifsaku, torn tzitzis strings, yachol azarkan lash, we can throw them in the garbage. They she mitzvah shein begufa kedusha. There's no intrinsic kedusha because mad shein kavus betalis. If the strings are connected to the talis, you can't use the string to tie something. For example, it's a bizur mitzvah. Says the Ramah, You shouldn't just throw them away in a very terrible garbage place. Ella she'ein tzrichim needed, but mikra din doesn't require burial. However, yesh medagda kim legoinzon. He brings. There are opinions to bury it. It says. Then the Shulchan Aruch continues. Talitot shel mitzvah shebolu. They're worn out. Adam boidel atzmo mehem. So you have to stay away from them. You can't clean yourself or to use them for some bad purpose. You throw them away and they become destroyed on their own. You can go in with tzitzis into a bathroom. The Ramah here adds that's permitted to sleep in a tzitzis garment, though it's customary not to do so. But we remember we went through machlokas. Do you sleep in your tzitzis? Do you not sleep? There were shitas that went either way. In addition to the ruling concerning how to dispose of tzitzis, this passage in the Shulchan Aruch also discusses the sanctity of the tzitzis strings while you're using them. Although the tzitzis fringes themselves do not contain any sanctity, one may not use them for other purposes while they are attached to the garment, just as one may not dispose of them in a disrespectful manner. Such use causes mitzvahs to appear degraded in the eyes of people. The Mishnah Berurah writes that one is only allowed to enter the bathroom with a talis cotton, but not with a talis gadol. That's why, of course, we all take our talis off before we go to the bathroom. The purpose of this limitation is to prevent disrespect to a garment used specifically for tefillah, right? We wear our tzitzis cotton all day. It's not designated specifically for tefillah, but we wear our talesim during davening, so that's on a higher level. The Yalkut Yosef addresses a number of practical situations related to using the talis and the tzitzis strings. Mutar lanakos esamish kapfayim betalis. You can clean your glasses with your beged garment, right? After talis gadol shemi yuchad lemitzvah the ein ze b'klal tal mishash b'yor. He says that's not a bizoyon. Talitat gedolot sheyesh ben atorah b'rosh ha'echad, right? Somebody who has a silver adornment to your talis. Va'aleh rekumim dvar shebigdusha. Let's say somebody has written in it names of Hashem or other holy words. K'gon shirak mo yitvisu al zeh nusach brachas hatalis, baruch ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, also likanis b'al beis hakisei, af la talat mei raglav, even to urinate. You would not be able to go into a beis hakisei with such a talis. He already said, it was somebody else. The Mishnah Berurah said, not with a talis gadol. Right. Also, lirkom psukim ala talis. He said in general, you should not engrave psukim on the garment. Some people wrote that there's a minhag to be makel regarding that. As long as you're careful to treat it with care and covet, that whatever is written on it's not going to be treated with the bizoyon. Al Maran, he says the Rav Yosef Karo b'Shulchan Aruch pasuk le'asor. He said you should not write a pasuk. Got to be called malkom and kfar near come. If it's already been written, mutar levarach latalis v'zar Yosef. You just have to be more careful with it. The reason for the final halacha not to insert psukim on a talis is explained in the Beis Yosef as being because the psukim may be subject to disgrace or degradation. Since the talis need not be placed in geniza, concern exists that it may be disposed of in a fashion that's inappropriate for actual Torah content that might be written on your talis. And one should therefore refrain from adding it to a talis. The same applies as well to adding psukim to other clothing or jewelry. In cases where psukim or even a few words from a pasuk have already been added to a jewelry or items of clothing, opinions differ as to whether one may still wear it, since the reason given by Yalkut Yosef for allowing wearing a talis already containing embroidered psukim is not applicable to those other items. Right, like a jewelry. Maybe you shouldn't wear it l'chatchila. According to Hershel Schechter, they should be placed in geniza, while according to some other poskim, they may still be worn while taking care to cover the psukim when entering a restroom. And there's further discussion. They give you some sources about inscriptions. What about if a woman tied your right? I told you Chaim Eisenberg and I was zocheh with him to tie my own tzitzis. What if your wife helped you? What if a woman did it? Women are exempt for the mitzvah tzitzis. and do not customarily wear them. Is a woman permitted to tie the tzitzis even if she does not wear them? For example, is a mother permitted to help her husband or sons tie their tzitzis? Like when they first purchase a tzitzis garment, where the strings are not already attached. Or if the knots of a kosher tzitzis garment become undone, like Elazar asked, and you want to rewind it, and maybe she's more adept than them than tying them. According to most Rishonim, such as the Rosh, women are permitted to affix the tzitzis strings to the garment and tie them. And that's the position of Shulchan Aruch. Ha'isha ksheira la'soisu. However, a few Rishonim, we mentioned tonight, the Marami Rottenberg. The Marami Rottenberg is buried in Worms. He lived like 1290, about that period of time. He was taken prisoner by the king, and they wanted to ransom for a huge amount, and he paskin not to allow it. He didn't want to bankrupt the Jewish community; they would just do it all the time. But a very wealthy man ransomed him, and the Maram is buried next to him. So I was in that cemetery in Worms, where Rashi, there's a yeshiva of Rashi, and the Rabbi Rottenberg's kever is full of candles, and the one next to him is also full of candles. He gets the same covet as the Rabbi Rottenberg. Right. And I think he died in jail, and then I think they ransomed just to get his body. You know why? There was a famous tshuva. Remember in Israel, there was a terrorist, a building collapsed. I remember once, and one of the, either Rav Carmel or Rav Yamid, they gave a shiur and they brought this story as some kind of riot to that, in terms of can you ransom or whatever. Oh, they wanted, remember, should you trade people for the bodies? Remember that we did trade prisoners for some bodies.
1,000 prisoners for Palestine.
Right.
For
So
one,
then I think in the halachic
circle.
analysis of that whole thing came up.
Yeah.
So a few Rishonim, including the Maram, ruled that only men may affix and tie the tzitzis. And the Ramah mentions that approach. Remember, we said the Ramah is in Ashkenaz, and the Marami Rottenberg was like the leader of Maril. There's the Maril, there's the Marami Rottenberg. I mean, there's the major Ashkenazic figures. So he says you should be stringent. Yesh machmir latzrik anoshim sheyasu etzonam v'tov lasu ken lechatchila. The Mishnah
Do they have to do a b'shem mitzvah? Do they have to tie it? Let's say if you're in the business, can you do it for someone else?
Yes.
You have to keep it on.
Mitzvah.
So then, how could a woman do it? According
Why not?
to the,
Why couldn't a woman do it?
we're not afraid she'd do it. She won't do it b'shem mitzvah. She'll do it. A woman will
I'm
do it
not sure
b'shem
why
mitzvah.
that would be a chisaron. I mean, by a cotton who's not a bardas, that would be a problem with kavana. I'm not sure with the woman would be a problem there. Let's see. The Mishnah explains the reason Maram as being that the words of the pasuk referring to Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, excludes females, not Bnei Yisrael, from the process of making the tzitzis. Says the Mishnah, Rafilu Oimid al Gabon. That means even if the man is observing or supervising what the woman is doing, lo mahani doesn't work. Mishum da'adaksiv Bnei Yisrael, va'asu mashma gam l'mayit Bnei Yisrael. So it's amazing that the Maram learned. It's not brought from the Gemara, but the Maram learned it as a miyut, as an exclusion for women. The Mishnah Berurah writes concerning Gentiles tying tzitzis, which all opinions hold disqualify the tzitzis, that only affixing the tzitzis to the garment and doing the first winding and knot is problematic. Davka im tochvu b'knaf, that means they should not be the ones inserting the first 4 strings into the hole. O asach chulyu akesher arishon, the kesher is the first knot and the first winding. Also Yisrael. If a Jew did that, va'enu yudi gomar sharchulius v'aksharim de'enin rak lemitzvah v'alma kosher. Wow. So if a Jew makes the first knot and does the first winding and then the second knot, a non-Jew can finish the tzitzis. Consequently, all poskim would allow women to tie or wind all the windings and knots after the first one. So it's a machlokes. The Shulchan Aruch allows it. The Ramos are machmir, and the Mishnah Berurah says not to. So, any comments, questions, or aros about tonight's shiur? We will continue Hilchos Tzitzis next Tuesday.
Sure.
Very good. Thank you.
Quiet.
See you in a minute.
See you in a minute for Daf Yomi.
tell you a very,
Go ahead, why, Ernie?
I was an army chaplain and I was
I saw your son Shabbos.
Oh,
The
where?
youngest-
Oh,
the young-
was
yeah,
there,
youngest.
there's a bar mitzvah, right?
My nephew, yeah.
Oh, how'd you like davening over there?
Beautiful, so nice. I mean,
Yeah.
really nice. The first time I was ever there. It's
Oh,
really
really?
nice. Yeah,
Oh.
it's really nice. Yeah.
So many young people there. It's amazing,
Oh,
isn't it?
it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's very nice. Yeah, it's really, and the davening is very sweet. Yeah. And then a lot of people come late, but
Well,
young people
yeah,
come late.
that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah. Did your son have a good time too? We had a kid across the street.
Oh, yeah,
too.
yeah, he enjoyed it very much. Yeah.
Yeah. He
When
he
he gets
stood out.
Labor Day.
He stood out with his red jacket.
Oh. He's a red coat.
He has red coat. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Okay, good friends with Moshe Buckman. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a nice group of kids there. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting with the tzitzis. I would think, they make them in China and they have goy. I would think so because it's so expensive to have handmade in. I don't know.
I don't know how they, I don't know.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
tzitzis
Who knows where they're
this-
actually coming from?
Yeah.
Scary sometimes.
Right. Yeah. A couple of years.
I wonder at Cedars, all the mezuzahs and Cedars.
Oh,
Is there a
if there's
cloth inside?
If there's empty, yeah. I don't know.
Because there's so many. There's hundreds, thousands. I don't know.
Every room.
Yeah, every room.
has them. So mezuzahs aren't cheap,
Not cheap. I know.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some mezuzahs made printed, like yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're not.
the Xerox machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Oh, well. Going in the Goyish world with this, everybody's asked, what's that? What is that? Not that I'm ashamed of anything, but you have to sit around and time to explain everything.
It's a security. It's our
and
security.
Yeah, and you don't want to take the time to everybody ask you. It's curious for people to ask you why you wear that, and then you have to sort of explain every time.
Right. Yeah, I mean today people wear all sorts of weird things. I don't think it's such a thing anymore.
No, that's true. You go in the big, people ask you, especially in this community. If you go in the Midwest, if you go into Iowa or something,
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But here, I guess it's okay. The Muslims go around and
I was just going to say that they're never ashamed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are we holding here?
We're on
Yud
18,
Ches.
Yud
Yud
Ches.
Ches. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna help myself.
So we're dealing with,
Good.
the, we should plan, Harold, maybe a siyum. You mentioned you wanted to host a siyum.
Yeah.
And maybe we should plan at the end of kindness, so we have a couple weeks notice,
Okay.
maybe around New Year's, maybe before.
That's a good
period of
idea.
time.
Yeah, people should be around between Xmas and New Year's. Okay.
Exactly, that might be a nice time. And we do all the siyum for all these masechtas.
Okay, we'll figure out a date.
So it says Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Yes.
Yeah. Alazar, you have your
Lazar, you have to
Yeah.
mute.
Yeah, oh, sorry, here, okay, here,
Thank you.
okay,
That's the Yom Shulchan. So there were dates. There was a Masechta called Megillus Tainus. In Megillus Tainus were various dates of various Yomim Tovim. For example, there was a certain Gzeira that the Romans did, and then they were saved from the Gzeira. So they made a Yontif, and that Yontif you couldn't fast, and you couldn't make eulogies. But not only that, they would aser the day before and the day after as well. So that means because they said one of the Yomim Tovim was from the 8th of Nisan to Pesach. So the Gemara wanted to say, well, why, I mean, Pesach, we know. Why would you have to say Pesach? So to say that the day before Pesach is also prohibited. Kaman Krab Yosi de Omar, Bein Lefon of Bein Lachrav Osir. The dates that are listed in Megillus Tainus, it's prohibited to do a hesped the day before and the day after. So Iachi Be'esrim Esisha Nami. So the 29th day of Adar. My area, so the first day of Nisan was the day that was made a yontif because they established the korbanat tamid. So what? To tell you that the day before, i.e. the 29th of Adar would be Asr of a, typically they have a yom the basar Asr mutam nebei. We would know that it's prohibited to make a eulogy on the 29th because it's the day after the 28th. And the 28th is also a day that's listed, the Tanya, Be'esrim Utam Nebei. On the 28th day of Adar, also Psor to Tavtul Yudoi, good news for the Jews, the Lo Ye'idin Min Araisa, that they don't have to violate the Torah. Shepamachas Gozra Malchus Arashor Shmad al Yisrael. The Romans made a decree. Shlo Yasku b'Torah, they shouldn't learn Torah. V'shlo Yamulus Bnei, they shouldn't circumcise their children. V'shiyachalalu Shabbosois, and they should violate Shabbos. Mo also Yehuda ben Shammua v'Chavir. What did Yehuda ben Shammua do? Holchu v'notlu eitza mimatrunisa achat. They went and took a advice from a certain Roman matron. She called G'dolei Romi Mitzuyin Etzla. She used to throw the swankiest parties, and all the Roman senators would end up in her house. Amr lahem. So the Jewish delegation came to her, and they said, "What should we do?" So she advised them, "Imdu vavginu balayla. Go and make a demonstration. Holchu vavginu balayla. Amru ishamayim." They called out to heaven. Lo achim anachnu. Aren't we all brothers? Lo b'nei av echad. Aren't we all sons of the same father? Lo b'nei em achaz. Aren't we the sons of the same mother? Manish taninu mikol uma v'loshan shetem goyim v'len gzeres rose. They were referring to the fact that Esav, the Romans are from Esav, and they said, "Listen, we're cousins." Right? We're the same. You have the same mother, the same father, Yitzchak and Rivka. Why should you treat us different than all other nations that are under your rule? By the way, in general, when we look at Roman history, the Romans were not like the Greek Hellenizers. The Romans usually left everyone alone regarding their religion. That's why, for example, they didn't have any problem with the Jews. You know, they had a problem with the early Christians. The Romans did persecute the early Christians because they respected old time religion that had a long history, and they knew the Jews had a long history. So they were very tolerant. Then later on, when the Jews rebelled against Rome, they came down very hard on them. After the demonstration, Bitlum, they abolished the Gzeira. Also Yom Shasu Yom Tov. That day was the 28th day of Adar, and they made it a Yontif. So why do you have to tell me that the 29th is Asr because of Rosh Chodesh? It should be Asr to make a eulogy because of the day after 28th. Yeah, but Adar isn't always a 29-day month. Sometimes it's a 30-day month. Therefore, the 30th day of Adar would be also, not the 29th day. So I had to be told that the 28th day is a yontif, so that the 29th would also be usher to make a eulogy. That's the way Abaya learns. Ravashi Amafilu Teimel Chodesh Chaser. I can give you an answer even for a 29-day month. Kol Sha'achrav B'Tainis Aser, but B'Hesped Mutter. Means the day after a yontif, you can't fast, but you're allowed to do your eulogy. But v'zeh hoyle mutal ben shtei yomim tovim. Since the 29th is placed in between two holidays, in between 28th, which was a holiday, and the 1st of Nisan, which was a holiday, asuk yontav atzmo v'alfil be'asbet namiyah. So they made it like a yontav itself, and they said that you can't do eulogies. Amar mitamne be'vat sof moada itutuv chagad shvud lo lemisped. So from the 8th of Nisan until the end of the Pesach was also Yomim Tov, that not to do eulogies, because we're going to see that the Tzdukim tried to get rid of Chag HaShavuos, and we saved them from that. So we already had a Yontif from the 1st to the 8th. So why do you have to mention the 8th? You should mention from the 9th. It 8th was already usher to fast. It was already in the period of time between the 1st and the 8th where they had established the Korban Atomi. And for the Gemara, since an Avel can have and a Shiva will come and Muvatal all of that, Tamne Gufa usher. Then the 8th remained as a yontif. It was the first of those days from the 8th to the end of Pesach where they had saved Chag HaShavuos from the Tzdukim. This explains the 29th of Adar. Somebody could become an Avel on the 28th. After Batisha Gufei Asr, that they had to Asr the 29th itself. Which was the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which was the day that they established the Korban Atom. Itmar. Rav Chia Barasi Omarav, Allah Rabbi Yosi, that the prohibition of fasting and Hesped is the day before the day after. Ushmul Amar Allah Rabbi Meir, Frank the Gemara, Mi Amar Shmuel Achi. Did Rav Meir say this? Vatani Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Oimer. How come it says behind lemisped behind lisana behind? You can't eulogize on that day, and you can't fast on that day. However, lifnei and lachrein mutarim. The day before those days and the day after are permitted. And Amar Shmuel Allah Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So how can you tell me Allah is like Rav Meir? It says very clearly Allah Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So me'ikaras are given to like a Tana to make like Rav Meir. Since there was no Tana who was lenient like Rav Meir, on Rav Meir, Kivan the Shamil Rav Shimon Gamliel the Mekel Tfei. Rav Shimon was more Mekel because he said both days were permitted. On Rav Shimon Gamliel. That both day before and after are prohibited. Explain to me. Adiloli sana. That's not to fast. Rav Yochanan say that. Rav Yochanan halachic is Mishnah. In general, Rav Yochanan says the halacha is like an unnamed Mishnah. It's not as an unnamed Mishnah. Even though by reading the Megillah, you can do it on the 11th, 12th, and the 13th, but you're allowed to make fasts and hespedim. Amen. Now, what are we talking about? Are you talking about somebody who lives in Yerushalayim, a walled city? Pick a Karle Bar Beisar, and such a person read it on the 14th. Umi Shari, is that permitted? Vaksiv Megillah's Tainis. Yom Arba Sarbo, Yom Chamisha Sarbo. The 14th and the 15th are Yom Purim. They're Purim. Elazar, you have to yourself.
Still,
Yeah, you gotta mute yourself.
okay, how's it now? Is it muted?
No. Okay, it's quiet now. So Yom Arba Sarba Yom Chamish Arba Yom Puria Inu Delolam Ispid Ben. These are Yom Purim that you can't make a eulogy. But Amar Rav Aloinitz Chana Le'asar Shel Zeb Zeb Shel Zeb Zeb. The 15th person cannot land on the 14th. The 14th can't land on the 15th. So what are you going to tell me? Bnei Abeis of Kakarla Betleisa? It's a 14th person who landed on the 15th, and that's why you can't have a Hesped Yom Nikanor. Who? That's another holiday called the Day of Nikanor. You're talking about a 14th person who landed on the 13th. But that's Yom Turyainus who. It's another holiday. Ella loved the Kokarle B'chadsar. He read it on the 11th. Ukitani mutter behesped of a tiny. So how can you tell me that Rav Yochanan holds that it's also the tiniest? Here it says it's mutter. Lo. It's not the right case. We're talking about Bnei Arba, so Kokarle B'tresar. It's a 14th day person who reigned it on the 13th. Udika Amrit, that's what you said, Yom Trinus, it's another Yontif. Yom Trinus Gufa Batuli Batlu. They abolished that Yontif, Hoil V'nergu Bo Shma V'achia Achiv, because his brothers were killed. Ki had Rav Nachman goes Trinus Betresa. Rav Nachman made a Trinus on the 13th. Amr Rabbanan Yom Trinus who? How can you make a Trinus? It's Yom Trinus. Yom Trinus Gufa Batula. They abolished that. Because his brothers were killed. I would typically have a Yom Shalifnei Nikanor. It's the day before Yom Nikanor. Yom Nikanor was another holiday that, because of the gates, which the Gemara will explain what these are. They were mavatal that as well. Between Yom Nikanor, Nekum, and Nigzer, because Yom Nikanor we should be geyser. Of course not. So what are these other holidays? My Nikanor or my Turyanis? This Tanya. Nikanor echad ma'africha yevonim hayah. Nikanor was a Greek officer. He would raise his arm against Yehuda of Yerushalayim. When will this city fall under my hand and I will destroy it? Here it's appropriate for Hanukkah. The Chashmonaim were able to defeat him. They cut off his thumbs, his hands and his feet. They hung them in the gates of Yerushalayim. The mouth that spoke with such haughtiness. This is the revenge. So that's the holiday of Yom Nikanor. My Triyanis, Triyanis wanted to kill these two Jews, Lulayanis and Papus, in Ludka. He said to them, if you were from the people of Chanan Mishav Azariah who jumped in to the furnace by Nebuchadnezzar and were saved, let your God come and save you from my hand. So Amru Lo, these two Jews said to him, they were tzaddikim. And a nes could happen for them. And Nebuchadnezzar melech hagunaya, he was a good king. And therefore a miracle happened because he was a righteous, not a righteous king, but a king that Hashem set up to have certain things happen through his offices. Also, Russia, you are a head yod. You're not a king. You, there's no nace that's going to occur. We can see that we've been given a gzera to be put to death from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you don't kill us, Kadosh Baruch Hu has other people that can kill us. There's a lot of bears and lions. Why did Hashem put us into your hands? Hashem wants to revenge against you our blood that you're going to spill. Afal pichein hargan miyad. He killed them. Arba lo zazim misham at shabot yuflim eromu patzus mochel begizrin. A whole group of officers came from Rome and killed him and knocked off his brain. You always start the fast Monday and Thursday, not Thursday. And we don't start also in Goizrin times Rosh Chadoshim. What's called Aschala. If you've had 3 fasts going into it, so then that's what it means, Tchila, unless you've started. Ravasi Yomer Achas, even 1 is considered a start. I mean, Amarab, that if there is a series of fasts, you don't initially make a fast on Chanukah or Purim or Rosh Chodesh. But if they've established a number of Taniyos, Monday, Thursday, Monday, and all of a sudden either Chanukah, Purim, or Rosh Chodesh falls, you fast and you complete the fast. Misana umashim. Haralach seder taniyas ketzad. Haralach seder taniyas ketzad. Haralach seder taniyas ketzad. Okay, we're going to start the next Mishnah tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we will learn at 8 o'clock.
Very good. Shkoyach, thank you.
Shkoyach, talk to you tomorrow.
Good night.